Let this man stand as an example to all of you.
Being an ordinary person can often bring peace to our hearts. Because being under the spotlight often only creates burden and pressure, so we can't fully be ourselves. Keep your spirits up for those of you who are struggling, enjoy your break, and happy watching.
Let's take Germany!
The movie begins by showing the oath of Nazi soldiers, who are always required to obey the existing government system. Elsewhere, in a Nazi camp located in Tunisia, North Africa, a colonel named Klaus von Stauffenberg is seen writing a note containing his views on Hitler's leadership. Stauffenberg argued that as long as the leadership of the German state was still in Hitler's hands, there would be no more peace and prosperity for Germany because of the endless wars spearheaded by the Nazis. Senior German officials also realized that the Allies were beginning to dominate the war. Not only Stauffenberg but many other officers who were also subordinates of Hitler were no longer in agreement with Hitler, plus the rampant cases of killing civilians and also the massacre of Jews. According to Stauffenberg, Hitler was not only the enemy of the world but also the main enemy of his own country, Germany. Therefore, Stauffenberg and his like-minded colleagues planned to rebel for change and Germany's safety. Not long after, Nazi troops in Tunisia were seen under attack from Allied troops. From this attack, many Nazi troops became victims, including Stauffenberg. Due to limited medical equipment, the victims were finally brought back to Germany for further treatment. On March 13, 1943, precisely on the eastern front of Russia, Hitler was seen holding a meeting. On the other hand, there was a general named Henning von Tresckow, who was one of the people from the rebel list who turned out to be secretly trying to carry out an attempt to kill Hitler. With his homemade time bomb embedded in a beverage bottle box, Tresckow left the box to a colonel named Heinz Brandt, who at that time happened to be on duty to escort Hitler back to Germany. After Hitler's departure, for hours, Tresckow anxiously awaited news of Hitler's death. Unfortunately, his plan failed because his bomb failed to explode, and Hitler managed to land safely. Fearing the assassination attempt would be discovered, Tresckow decided to travel to Germany to retrieve the box. Upon arrival, Tresckow was also found to have a colleague who joined Hitler's rebel ranks, General Friedrich Albrecht. Shortly after, Tresckow managed to get the box back from Colonel Brandt, and fortunately, Colonel Brandt did not suspect the box's contents at all. A few days later, Stauffenberg's wife Nina was seen visiting Stauffenberg, who had survived an attack by the Nazis earlier. But because of the attack, Stauffenberg had to lose his right hand, the fingers of his left hand, and also his left eye. After Stauffenberg recovered, Albrecht was seen coming to him to provide information about the rebel plotters who would soon hold a meeting to organize a new strategy to kill Hitler. A few days later, the meeting finally occurred, and a debate ensued.
A measure? What about total, complete, utter failure? This is a military operation.
Some of them argued to attack Hitler directly, while others claimed to let Hitler die at the hands of his enemies. Knowing the discussion, Stauffenberg tried to mediate by asking them what they would do when Hitler was eliminated. According to Stauffenberg, if Hitler were killed, the war would continue because the Nazis had other officials who could have replaced Hitler. Therefore, instead of arguing, Stauffenberg told them to think about their plans carefully. After the meeting was over, Stauffenberg decided to go home. When he arrived home, he was greeted by his wife and 4 children. Even though Stauffenberg's physical condition was no longer normal, Nina seemed to love him sincerely. Shortly afterward, their house was suddenly shaken by the effects of an Allied army attack. Seeing the onslaught of the Allied armies, Stauffenberg's determination to overthrow Hitler's leadership became more determined. This was due to Stauffenberg's great concern for the fate of his small family if the war continued. The next day, Stauffenberg immediately held a meeting with the Rebel Alliance. Stauffenberg immediately explained his brilliant idea by utilizing Hitler's Valkyrie operation to launch a coup there. Valkyrie is an order for the German Territorial Reserve Army to carry out necessary actions to save the country from destruction, including bringing order to civil unrest due to national problems. Stauffenberg planned to kill Hitler first. Only after that, they would slander the Schutzstaffel, the Nazis' largest military organization, by making news that it was the Schutzstaffel who had tried to kill Hitler to seize power. When the slander spread, they would then begin Operation Valkyrie. With the accusation against the Schutzstaffel, it was hoped that the public would later find out and side with Stauffenberg's group. Then, under Stauffenberg's direction, the rebel gang will have a great chance to take over the government to prevent Schutzstaffel from taking over. However, they still had one obstacle, a general named from, as the Valkyrie operation could only be carried out with his approval. Albrecht and Stauffenberg were tasked with manipulating From to join the rebels' ranks, but unfortunately, From was very loyal to Hitler. Fortunately, Albrecht and Stauffenberg were not immediately followed up by From at that time, even though From himself had realized that there was an indication of betrayal. Because the mission failed, Stauffenberg also changed the plan by controlling Berlin later because Berlin is the center of government. If Berlin is successfully held, then the entire German territory will quickly join their side. After that, they would surround the government offices and stop the movement of the Schutzstaffel and the Gestapo, the Nazi elite police. They had also prepared a change of Valkyrie's orders and a letter informing them that Hitler was dead.
Adolf Hitler is dead.
In addition, Albrecht, who had authority over the troops, immediately promoted Stauffenberg to the head of the troop section so that Stauffenberg could know the movements and have direct access to Hitler. After that, Stauffenberg was introduced to his new aide, Werner von Haeften. After getting acquainted with Haeften, without further ado, Stauffenberg boldly presented his ideas to Haeften. In addition, he also explained his goal to coup Hitler. Hearing this idea, Haeften agreed with him and was willing to follow Stauffenberg to create a free German state. On June 7, 1944, Stauffenberg and Haeften visited Hitler's private residence in Berghof. There, Stauffenberg met with Hitler and other officials. Stauffenberg's goal was to submit a copy of Valkyrie that he had changed. These changes include the government security time from 6 to only 3 hours, and the most vital units will be focused on Berlin. All of this was done by Stauffenberg so that the rebels could more quickly take over Hitler's power. Luckily, Hitler also fully trusted Stauffenberg and immediately signed the copy. Shortly after that, elsewhere, the rebels again strategized Hitler's assassination. They planned to place a bomb in the Wolf's Lair, the bunker where Hitler took refuge. Because of the sealed condition of the bunker, the explosive power will be much more significant, and inevitably, everyone inside will also be killed. However, if their plan failed and Hitler was still alive, they would still carry out Operation Valkyrie right after the bomb was successfully detonated. In addition, to smooth their actions, in the Wolf's Lair, they also have a partner, a general named Erich Feldfebel. Feldfebel will later be in charge of cutting off all the communication networks there. When Hitler's subordinates were caught off guard, they had the momentum to take over the government. In addition, at the meeting, Albrecht also reminded Stauffenberg to ensure the presence of Göring and Himmler at the bomb site. Their deaths were critical to the success of the mission. Because Göring and Himmler, who were Nazi frontmen, could have seized the leadership after Hitler died. After the meeting, Stauffenberg immediately went home to tell his wife about all the rebellion plans he would carry out. He also told his wife to look after his children if he failed. On July 15, 1944, the rebel plot was finally ready to carry out Hitler's assassination attempt. On that day, Hitler was known to be attending a meeting. Ludwig again explained the structure of the Hitler assassination plan so that all those involved really understood, starting from the assassination of Hitler to taking power, and also their ultimate goal of making an armistice so that mainland Europe could survive the devastating effects of the Second World War.
This will identify you as a member of the operation. All SS. With Berlin secured, Dr. Gödler will address the nation as our new Chancellor. Witzleben and I will assume.
Finally, the coup plan began. Albrecht immediately sent orders to mobilize the entire reserve army without explaining why. On the way to the wolf's lair, Stauffenberg remembered his children and wife, whom he had ordered to go to Bamberg to save herself. Arriving at the wolf's lair, carrying a bag filled with bombs, Stauffenberg entered the meeting room of high-ranking officials. He found General Fromm, who was also there. Fromm seemed very suspicious of Stauffenberg's arrival. It can be seen from his gaze that he always headed towards Stauffenberg. Not long after, Hitler finally arrived, but unfortunately, Himmler was not there.
General Harper was brought in to replace.
Knowing this, Stauffenberg rushed out of the meeting room to contact Albrecht.
Divisions will stick to a mobile defense plan rather than holding any one particular.
When Colonel Mertz von Quernheim picked up the phone, he immediately forwarded the information to Ludwig and the others. After hearing this, one of the officials, Gordiller, wanted to cancel the mission. However, Stauffenberg wished to continue with the mission. However, when he returned to the room, the meeting had ended, and he decided against it. Finally, General Fromm realized the indications of a treasonous plan and threatened to arrest Albrecht if the reserve army was mobilized without his knowledge. In the evening, the rebel plotters had another discussion. There, Gordiller said that it would be useless if Hitler died, but Himmler was still alive because Himmler would take over the government and Hitler's role. Of all the rebel officials, only Gordiller always had a different opinion. Shortly afterward, Gordiller suddenly received a letter from Himmler containing an order for his arrest on suspicion of treason. Upon learning this, they asked Gordiller to leave immediately to avoid being caught. From here, they began to entrust and hand over the strategy of the rebellion plan to Stauffenberg. On July 20, 1944, the rebels finally got a golden opportunity to overthrow the government. Stauffenberg was again assigned to attend a meeting while they had prepared a time bomb in the bag he would carry. When arriving at the meeting place, during the identity check, a confidant of Hitler helped Stauffenberg with his bag, causing Stauffenberg to become very panicked. As it turned out, the meeting room had been moved to a conference room with many windows. This meant the bomb explosion would not be as incredible as in the wolf's lair. Seeing this situation, Stauffenberg placed his bag very close to Hitler. Not long after, Feldfebel pretended to call Stauffenberg so that he would have an excuse to leave the room. During the meeting, they began to discuss the Allied countries that were beginning to dominate the war, which made Hitler angry and hit the table. His punch caused Stauffenberg's bag to fall. Seeing this, the person previously next to Stauffenberg immediately picked up the bag and moved it under the table in front of him, moving it slightly away from where Hitler was standing. Not long after, the bomb exploded. In the chaos caused by the explosion, Stauffenberg immediately asked a soldier who was there to escort him away on the pretext of getting an essential order from Hitler. However, when he arrived at the guard post, Stauffenberg was detained by a sergeant named Kolbe, even though he had explained the reason. Finally, Stauffenberg pretended to call the military leader and said that Sergeant Kolbe was holding him out when Stauffenberg had not called anyone. Out of fear, Kolbe was forced to open the gate and let Stauffenberg leave. On the way, Haften deliberately threw away the remaining bombs so that no evidence could be found. However, the soldier who escorted them away noticed it. The soldier became suspicious of them. During the panic, Feldfebel immediately cut off all communication links. However, elsewhere, Albrecht did not even dare to run the Valkyrie operation before he got the information that Hitler was dead. Quernheim, who felt he was waiting too long for Albrecht's decision, immediately began writing orders to gather reserve troops first. Elsewhere, Stauffenberg, who had arrived at the airfield, immediately contacted Albrecht and vented his anger at Albrecht for his delay in carrying out the Valkyrie operation. Stauffenberg also stated that Albrecht was already 3 hours late and put the lives of all his colleagues at risk. He also ordered Albrecht to meet General Fromm to give him the choice of joining the rebels or being arrested. Operation Valkyrie was eventually signed off secretly by Albrecht on behalf of Fromm. After that, Albrecht immediately contacted the communication center to convey that Hitler had died and slandered the Schutzstaffel as the mastermind behind Hitler's death because they planned to take over the government. Therefore, like it or not, Operation Valkyrie had to be carried out. General Frum, who still doubted the news of Hitler's death, immediately contacted one of his colleagues named Wilhelm Keitel. Keitel said that Hitler was still alive and had only suffered a few injuries. Keitel also mentioned that Hitler wanted to meet with Stauffenberg because Keitel already knew about Stauffenberg's involvement from the soldiers who helped Stauffenberg carry the bags and also from the officers who escorted him out of the meeting location. The officers were convinced that Stauffenberg was the mastermind of the explosion. Not long after, Stauffenberg met General Frum in his room. Frum learned that Albrecht had carried out the Valkyrie operation on his behalf. Stauffenberg again asked Frum whether he wanted to join them or not. Although Frum's life was also threatened because of his negligence, which made the Valkyrie operation successful, Frum remained firm in his refusal to join. Eventually, Frum was captured and held captive by the rebels. After that, Stauffenberg met all the rebel members, who were increasing in number. There, Stauffenberg ordered them to seize the government immediately. One by one, the districts began to be taken over by the rebels, and the reserve forces began to arrest the top brass of the Schutzstaffel. Although many districts were informed that Hitler was still alive, Stauffenberg tried to convince them that it was propaganda from the Schutzstaffel to take over the government. Even so, Stauffenberg still couldn't take complete control of Berlin. Elsewhere, at the information center, to be precise, 2 arrest orders came in that made them look confused. One came from the Wolf's Lair to arrest Stauffenberg, while the other ordered Stauffenberg to stop Joseph Goebbels immediately. Goebbels was one of the Nazis' best orators and propaganda experts, so Stauffenberg planned to scapegoat him as the perpetrator of the rebellion and leader of the Schutzstaffel. The communications center finally sent the 2 orders to the commander of the reserve forces who was leading the Valkyrie operation, Otto Ernst Riemer. After receiving the 2 conflicting orders, Riemer was convinced that a power struggle was taking place. Nevertheless, Riemer could do nothing and could only carry out the orders he had received. Riemer immediately went to Goebbels' residence. When he entered the room, he saw Goebbels calling someone. Goebbels told Riemer to take the call. And what was Riemer's surprise when he discovered that Hitler was still alive and was talking to him on the call. Hitler ordered Riemer to capture the rebels alive. The situation was reversed. Stauffenberg and the other rebels were in a hazardous situation. Riemer quickly ordered the reserve troops to turn around to capture the rebels and release the Schutzstaffel officials. The officials in the communications center began to realize that there had been an attempt to seize power. They finally cut off all communications from Stauffenberg and only connected communications to the Wolf's Lair. The rebels also began to realize that their communications had been cut off. At the same time, the reserve troops had also received orders to end the Valkyrie operation, which had officially been stopped. And there was news broadcasting that there had been an assassination attempt on the supreme Nazi leader, Adolf Hitler. It was reported that Hitler was still alive and only suffered a few burns. Knowing this, the rebels lost hope and believed that soon they would be sentenced to death. Not feeling all that, Stauffenberg repeatedly reassured himself and his colleagues by saying that he saw the explosion with his own eyes. In his heart, Stauffenberg did not believe that Hitler had survived the explosion. After that, Stauffenberg also asked the other rebel members to leave immediately to save themselves. Shortly after that, Riemer and the reserve army surrounded the rebel headquarters. The rebel officials who had not had time to escape finally could not do anything else and chose to surrender. General Frum suddenly appeared when captured and did not want them to be caught alive. He decided to sentence them to death on the spot. Hearing this, Ludwig preferred to commit suicide. Frum chose to sentence them to death and not send them alive to Hitler so that there would be no testimony from them saying that he was also involved because he had neglected and allowed the Valkyrie operation to take place. Not long after, Hitler made an official announcement that he was fine. In addition, Hitler also revealed that there had been an attempt to seize power and coordinated all troops to arrest everyone involved in the rebellion. After that, the rebels were shot dead by Frum in turn. When it was Stauffenberg's turn, Haeften suddenly paid his last respects by protecting Stauffenberg. And then it was Stauffenberg's turn. Before he was shot, Stauffenberg had shouted out loud, "Long live a free Germany." In written history, after the rebellion was successfully suppressed, Hitler immediately carried out a cleansing action by arresting at least 7,000 people involved in the uprising and sentenced to death, 5,000 of them. In addition, General Fromm was also executed in March 1945, and Nina, Stauffenberg's wife, survived the war and died in April 2006. The attempted uprising by Stauffenberg and his colleagues is known today as the July 20th plot, and was also the last of 15 attempted German uprisings to kill Hitler. Miraculously, Hitler always managed to escape the assassination that targeted him. However, in the end, 9 months after the July 20th plot failed to overthrow the government, the Allies finally besieged Berlin, and Hitler was found dead of suicide. And so the movie ends.